Hello there, kia ora. Sorry, I was just looking up the definition of nanny state. Anyway, the government is currently crowing about its ban on cell phones in schools, and this is a really interesting topic to look into for a couple of reasons. Like the fact this is one of the few pieces of policy that the National Party put out that they claimed had research behind it, which it didn't. The research that they referenced was really specific and not saying what the party is saying. Or the fact that this has absolutely nothing to do with that laser focus we were promised on the cost of living crisis, but actually focusing on that would have had better outcomes for our students in the long run than banning cell phones. You see, this is where things get really super messy with this particular policy, which doesn't technically kick in until the second term, I think it is, this year. You see, our students aren't actually doing anywhere near as bad as some of the media and politicians would like you to think that they are. The report that they referenced, the National Party, when they put out this policy, was a report done by a group called PISA, which is the Program for International Student Assessment that's done as part of UNESCO through the OECD, of which we're one of 80 members. This is where things get kind of fascinating because New Zealand students are actually in the top groups for things like science, reading, and mathematics. And that's not a bad result at all, considering we're told just how abysmal our education sector is. In fact, at least 71% of students aged 15 have attained what they call a level 2 proficiency in mathematics, which is significantly more than the OECD average. So our students aren't actually doing too bad there, even with all the cell phones. But you see, the report that was commissioned by these people that the National Party referenced was really specifically looking at how cell phone usage in schools is going and what could be done about it. But because it's a blanket report dealing with 80 countries, it was never ever going to say we need to ban cell phones outright. Instead, what they've actually recommended is finding new ways to integrate technology with students in their day-to-day lives to find ways that work for them that also work for educators. And that's common sense. And one of the other problems that crops up with something like a blanket ban on cell phones is that each of our students have different needs and different access points to technology. A blanket ban does not make it possible for all of those needs to be met in all sorts of different ways. And educators told the government that. But of course, why does the government want experts to tell them anything? That's just ridiculous. One of the other things that did come through in this report, though, was just how high the technology use was for students within the school system on an international scale. And we were the fourth largest user of cell phones in schools. But the report that came out from Sweden, which was actually above us on that list, showed that, well, cell phones in schools have no discernible difference on the education levels of students. But do you know what does? Poverty. That's right. The people who did the best out of the PISA assessment, well, in this country in particular, but also trending across the world, were the ones who are in the top 25 percentile for income earning. Basically, they weren't poor. From a socioeconomic point of view, they had no disadvantages. The ones that did have the biggest disadvantages were the ones that had the lower socioeconomic rankings to deal with. So, by dealing with something like the cost of living crisis to help bring people out of poverty and stop people sliding back into it while everything is so expensive, would have had a far better long term outcome on the education of our young people than banning cell phones. And it's not just me saying it, it's the report that the government themselves referenced, that the New Zealand Herald ran with, that is saying it as well.